So today we'll talk a little bit on yeah, this should be week 4. So we'll be highlighting the finishing touches on taxes, going over estate planning and diving into the investment module. So I was just having a conversation with Joe and asked a little bit about estate planning. We were talking about the challenges with that. So as we're on the topic, what other questions do you guys have that are maybe a little bit more particular in terms of that module?
What question was already asked? So I know not to repeat the same question.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're good. Joe, what did you, I guess you just, is there anything in particular?
Yeah, I was just thinking through on the use case that we have. They're obviously going to have a lot of assets at the end of their career, right? Because they already have millions of dollars. And who do you work with to set up the trust structure, or who's the knowledge most? Is it the financial planner, or is it a state lawyer, or I mean, it feels like it's kind of a hybrid, and he was basically saying that it is basically a hybrid, and larger firms will have both skill sets in them, and that's how they kind of determine the best cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's this like partnership with the community, so I mean, even if you have someone in-house that does it, you still want to know those outside people because eventually at some point you're probably going to have someone come in and they'll have an estate drawn up by so and so, law firm, and it's good to be able to make that connection. And it's the same thing as with tax planning, really, for that regard. So, but estate planning is one of those deals where, like, actually, tomorrow morning I'll have a meeting with a client, and I know there's circumstances because I've met with them just not long ago, and she wants to draw up an estate a trust for her estate, but she really probably is not going to be in a category that needs it. And so, it just depends on really the level of complexity in your financial situation. If you have kids, in her situation, she's a grandmother now, like, so she's past the kid age world. She doesn't really have much in her estate outside of her IRA. And yeah, so like, and I don't think there's land involved. Maybe that would be the only thing I'm not sure of, and so for her, she just needs to make sure she has everything TOD'd or POD'd over. And if that's the case, then it's going to be, nothing's going to go into probate. There's not going to be any extenuating circumstances. So there are other reasons, maybe some other outlier things. Like sometimes you have kids who don't get along with each other. A lot of people in our world today come from, they come to you in their late 50s or early 60s, and many of them are blended families, right? So they've been through a divorce, they have kids, and then they get married to another person. And so you have this step family, combined family thing that actually does mean estate planning can be a little bit more challenging, right? Are my stepchildren going to be a part of my legacy inheritance? Or is that something that we are going to keep separate, and her things maybe would go to her kids and my things would go to, so it's not maybe as cut and dried would be another thing that we oftentimes see. Sometimes that entails going ahead and going after a trust. But there are a lot of like people out there doing seminars saying that everybody in the world should have a trust. And I'm not necessarily in that category. And I hope I'm not refuting other words or oppose, maybe standing in paradox to what other things you guys have heard. But anyway, that's just kind of our take on stuff because probate court would be probably the same cost as having a trust drawn up in the end. And now you don't want to go to probate. There's other reasons why not to do that except for expense, but it can be uh so there's a lot of circumstances when we will tell people, yeah, in your circumstance, because of what you have going on, a trust isn't necessary. Because you already have everything in lined up the way you need it to go. And so we just need to make sure your beneficiaries are in good order, and you'll be set. So,
Is it safe to
you
say,
guys,
is it
yeah,
safe?
go
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say real quickly, is it safe to say for our scenario that the unified tax credit, if they were both to pass away tomorrow, would eliminate the estate tax, but because they have so much, like what Joe was saying, their estate's just gonna grow rapidly over the next 40, 50 years, which is when the real estate planning really has to kick in, right? In a nutshell.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to think, if anyone has that type of asset level at all, unless they're in their like 90s, right? You would probably say, okay, there is a chance that your estate might be taxed if we found you living a little longer than you'd expect and markets grow, or you have one asset that ends up like, exponentially outperforming some of the other things that you have going on. And so, yeah, with their asset level, their age, they're going to need to be considering that long game. So, what was it in my presentation last week? Only, it's not very many people get the opportunity to worry about that, and that the estate tax, at least at the federal level. Now in Illinois, Sergio, there's concern because your estate can be taxed at the state level for much lower asset. But yeah, that number has grown exponentially. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when that number for a couple married filing jointly was under $5 million.
And that was the other part that might sunset next year. And then they wanted to move to Washington where there is a state death tax or estate tax. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's all of the tax really is the Trump era tax reform is set to sunset at the end of 25. Right. So you're going to see bigger changes than probably that one. That one almost seems to be a back of the mind thought, but it could, in theory, if nothing changes, I think it's probably a flip of a coin if we see any change. It might be a politicking thing too. I don't know. I think probably either party is going to be pushing to make some type of change before the end of 25. But that's just my thought. And it's not really so much, well, who's in the Oval Office or who's in control of Congress. Congress is probably a bigger piece to that than the other. But all that being said, the standard deduction will again go back down significantly. And then all of your tax brackets are going to be shifted back up. So, yep, good point.
So in regards to that template, the estate tax planning template, are we calculating it based on how many more years we're expecting them to live, which their since their life expectancy, or at least for Aubrey, is 89 and she's 24. Is that the number we're supposed, the 65 years? Is that what we're supposed to be calculating? What would be, or is it based on? Because what crossed my mind was creating this template based on what would happen if she passed away now, like what would happen with what their current estate looks like, which would be pretty much everything into probate and whatnot. But
yeah, there's a pretty, I think just use logic, right? So obviously the recommendation is going to need to move them in steps where everything has beneficiaries, everything is TOD'd over. But then in terms of the longer horizon estate planning, right, you need to go ahead and maybe run some simple calculations to see just exactly how large their estate could grow, and then at that point, that's where all of a sudden you're going to have to make some calculated decisions from A to Z all along the way to try to get them underneath probably that number. It sounds probably a little bit cumbersome. I guess that would be what steps could be taken to start mitigating that in the now, I guess would be a way to say that. So, So yeah, I mean, I know you guys are thinking about this because it's due tonight. So what are some recommendations that you guys have in terms of strictly in the estate planning section? What are some recommendations that you're going to be making?
Well, I did a little bit of the time value of money calculations to, you know, to figure out that they're going to be way over most likely any scenario. So
Mind
definitely,
boggling.
yeah, seriously, if I was 24 and had that. But yeah, so I mean, obviously putting things into joint title and, you know, making sure beneficiaries, I mean, those are the basics, and also setting up a will and all the necessary estate documents that are associated that, so they are protected since they're newly married as well. So I think a lot of it is taking their sole ownership and making it joint. And then, you know, eventually there could be some trusts created around that as well, AB trust or something like that to ensure things flow properly to realize all the necessary deductions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Life transitions. I mean, I like today I sat down with a client, her mom had passed away, and she worked at a hospital, and her mom had issues with the hospital that were like malpractice issues. And so she said she can't work there anymore. And it's interesting because it was like change is what really spurs people on. Now, this couple, right? They're still really young, but you're right, they went through a marriage, right? And so honestly, everyone in their first year of marriage probably should go meet with somebody to figure out how they're gonna do their financial life. Not only that, but then this couple also has all of the little things in terms of making sure that their house is in order. And so you are correct to say that they're in need of a lot of work. So they have done a little bit of stuff, right? Like we know for a fact that they do have a CRUT. Dr. Net calls it CRUT. So a CRUT, CRUT something. So we do know though that does mean that there is a trust already established. And so now we can go through the process of trying to put, you know, the trust as beneficiary and retirement accounts, you know, putting taxable accounts into the name of the trust and things like that. What are some other recommendations? About estate planning?
Donor advisor fund eventually after they do the basics, to align with what they said in the scenario. They wanted to prioritize giving. So using that as a way to fund what they want to prioritize, but also use it in a tax savvy way.
Yeah, the CRUT will get them started, but it's limiting, it's rigid, right? And so what is nice about the donor advised fund is its flexibility in the years that you can give. And so this is actually another probably piggyback on the tax recommendation. If you really think about it, it is an investment account type of recommendation, right? A donor advised fund is another type of registered account that you'd be opening, and you're putting it into the fund's discretion, but you really do hold the control of where it's going in terms of its giving power, but you can cluster your giving. And so I actually use every third year clusters with clients, and we've mentioned this before already, but that's a great method, Sergio. So that's another recommendation. Anything else?
Well, they have a kid on the way, so they could, you know, plan in a not too distant future to give the yearly tax limit, you know, for gift amount in ways so they could pass on to their child and set up 529 or the other possibilities.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So they could kind of establish almost like a yearly automatic contribution to an account for their child in that minimum amount. What is it? What, $18,000 now? Something like that. Yep. Yeah. Plus the 529, I think could go on top of that. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
That's good. What else?
I think also with them wanting to do the investment property, like the laundromat and the I think it was a duplex or something down the road.
Mhm.
Taking not necessarily doing that now, but thinking through like, okay, how can that be incorporated to an estate plan, but also to do it in a tech savvy way. So I'm not sure the specifics, but like to use those big like 1039s and all that, or 1031s or all that kind of stuff.
So what's you guys' take on that? I mean, would you really, if it came down to things, would you put in your recommendations, especially the laundromat, but even a rental property? Are there any catches with that?
There's definitely in a sense there's a crawl, walk, run type scenario here where they're missing a lot of the basics.
Mhm.
And to me, my initial, you know, set of recommendations were get your house in order, have a kid,
Yeah.
get your trust set up. And then as you get further down the line, since they're so young, if you want to start to explore some of the more advanced ways of passing on money or sheltering it,
Yeah.
that feels like that's, 5, 10 years down the line. That
No, I think you're exactly right. Furthermore, there's a concern there of their capacity and interest in this. Like in some ways, like they have, they hit it rich with crypto, so like obviously they have a little interest in um the world of finance, but also the time and inclination that comes with especially a laundromat is not that's not passive income, right? That's quarters, taking it to the bank and going back to get more quarters and fix machines and deal with a lot of things that probably are going to be a lot more work than they would consider. So yeah, you could add that in your recommendation, but there are some recommendations that are going to take a little bit of um, working through with the client, right? You can't just say, this is a recommendation, so here are the good. And there were a few papers as I was going through this weekend from the last module on tax planning, where it's like, yeah, you can mention that, but please, you need to put some disclaimer in the bottom as you're explaining this, that there are some negatives to this type of decision. So an example of that would be like an S corp, right? Like you could have this couple establish an S corp, and potentially maybe see some of that income pass through to them, not as active income, but as distributions from the S corp. But then also note that that's going to require a lot more, not just the legal side of things, even though there's a little bit of that, but it's also going to take a little bit more effort and creative designing, and then also you do increase your risk of audit tenfold. So just like you have to put that in there if you're going to mention the concept of starting an S corp. I think for the most part, since they don't have a large income, but they have a lot they could write off on it, and again, I'm going back to their tax recommendations, which we're going to talk about in a little bit even. But I kind of think an LLC, or even just tracking their business expenses is probably, to your point, Joe, that's the crawl, like, or maybe walk, but not the run. They're trying to do everything all at once. And so that's where this job's hard, isn't it? The prioritization of recommendations can sometimes be crazy because you really do, you could sit down and go probably through 50 recommendations by the time we're done. And maybe over the course of a meeting every couple of months, you could get through that many, and their financial life would probably be transformed. But there's also a good chance that if many of them involved their actions, probably not going to get through all of them. So I've said it time and time again because it's the truth of it. But like we've got the economy of words, the economy of effort, and the economy of time. And if you're overwhelming a client in any of those or all of those, they might shut down on you. They might not, be able to really, they stop taking it in, and it just becomes a jumbled mess to them. And so presenting to them in a way that's really useful is a big deal. And so as we go through recommendations, I love to see a simple few words as a heading, a title, right? Like my recommendation, donor advised fund, for tax efficiency, and then give explanation underneath that. But if you're just giving me paragraphs or even just bullets that have words and words and words in them, we get lost in that. And so it's even going to be worse too in the final financial plan you made, because each one of these is going to be broken down, and you're gonna see just laundry list after laundry list, and that's hard. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, again, let's go back to what's due tonight. You guys are talking about estate planning. You made some good recommendations. We've missed a couple of the basics though. So is there anything else that stands out to you?
I would say in regards to the will and creating a will, it's making sure that that we have a power of attorney
Yeah.
set up for that, so that way we just know that there's going to be some control with
Yes.
all those decisions being made.
Yes, absolutely. The will is probably the starting point, will, POA, the health directives, and as they have the kid on the way, it almost be beneficial to plan to add, of course, that information in, which will updates are common, right? Especially once you're going through your child rearing years. So yeah, there's a little bit more. I'd say another simple thing is just like consolidation and password management, and putting all of their accounts in one place. So like you can tell both Devin and Aubrey, they don't necessarily are always communicating well with each other. It wouldn't surprise me if one of them has 60% of the username or passwords on accounts, and one of them has 40%, and they don't necessarily maybe communicate with one another. And so that's another piece to that as well, right? Just trying to keep all your assets in one place, especially with the crypto keys and things like that. That's a scary world, man. Like you lose a password, you lose your, whatever it is, your digital wallet information. Some of those are even like printed out. You get 3 tries and then you get locked out forever. So pretty implicative stuff to try to make sure that you really do have that in order. A lot of stories out there of crypto millionaires who lost their thumb drives, so, so yeah. Oof. Anything else that stands out that you wanted to talk about as it relates to estate planning? I will say it's probably the shortest assignment, probably the most painstaking assignment. If you feel that way, I always felt like that whenever I was going through the estate planning side of things, because it's not so much as like following a template, right? Like when we get to the investment side of things, you can see where they have and maybe see where they can be going, and it's easy to think like that. In estate planning, you really usually are kind of conjuring from nothing the material that they need to create, and so that becomes maybe a little more impetus on you to know all of these different aspects of things. A GRUT, GRUT is also when you talk about the ballooning of their assets, maybe they also need to establish one of those SALT accounts, SLT accounts. I don't know that much about them. I know that in this situation, I know enough to know that in this situation it might be applicable though. So that's some of the higher, heavier, further down the line kind of things. So I'll stop there. Any other questions or thoughts?
I think in some of my recommendations, I just recommended questions for them to discuss about what their values are with their estate. Like, to what degree are they going to be charitably inclined? To what degree will they want to try to pass things on to their kids? And then said, there'll be different strategies depending on what degree you want of each thing. So, you might be more inclined to do like an ILIT if you're wanting to pass more on to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you might just focus more on the CRUT or other giving strategies if you're more just charitably inclined with sort of the excess of the estate
Yeah.
tax.
Very good. Yeah, that's another point as well, because estate planning has to line up with legacy planning. And so you gotta start with the goals of clients and then try to do your best to parse through that. You know what I mean? And so that's not so much about being prescriptive as it is about listening to them, listening to their goals, and then lining out these different things that are options for them that would align with those goals to see if it aligns. Furthermore, you have nothing is static, right? Nothing is ever staying still when we're working in financial plans. And so you've got to think that at some point this account will grow and this account might shrink. Their meme stocks might do poorly, their Bitcoin or crypto might triple. You never know, but yeah, that's the challenge, is that and that's why really financial planning it can never be really a one and done type of thing. You're never creating a plan you should never create a plan that's not going to be a living plan. You know what I mean? And where you're going to be coming alongside of them and making changes and amendments and updates to that on a year by year basis. All right, so talk a little bit about tonight's agenda. I'd planned to go over estate planning, and so I know I get kind of where I'm trying to put myself in your boat. You guys are thinking about this as it's coming due tonight. And so it was good probably to get that squared away. And so yeah, and also the more I think about things too, I'm like, it's good to talk through this together before you turn in your assignments, so even if it is something that you're listening to in class tonight because you're available here too, it helps. But you make a few amendments and changes for something that's due in a little bit, that's fine. So I want to share a few things with you. So I'm going to jump on the share here. And we're going to go into put a little PowerPoint together talking about, really just review of the tax module to begin with. But before we do that, let's look at our class information. There's one thing in here, and I haven't had too many people ask about it because it's an extra thing. And I know a lot of you are probably not, looking to add to your list of things at this point. But this is an optional assignment. I think in the past, Dr. Annette had made this a requirement at times. If you're interested in making more networking connections, here are some, kind of a little sidebar opportunity for you to network a little bit. And so everyone's always in a different boat, man, especially at this point, right? Because you're in a capstone class, you've been through a lot of material, or maybe you've had an opportunity to make connections, or maybe you haven't. But the rules of the game kind of change. I remember starting in the PhD program at Kansas State and being presented an article called like the rules of the game have changed. And it's like, imagine you going to a sporting event and everything's just different now, and they're keeping score and track of who's going to win, and it's based on something that's totally different than what you're used to. And that's kind of like, as you get past the undergrad world into where you guys, a lot of you are in your certification schedule, or in your pursuit of a master's. But even continuing on, if you decided to go on to a PhD or a doctorate, it's not so much about like getting A's and getting 100% on an assignment in doing that well. It's good to do your assignments and get your work done, but it's more about the network connecting opportunity that you're able to grow. Are you growing your knowledge in the field, not just knowledge in the textbook? And so I think that's kind of a starting point. This little assignment is for that kind of thing. And so the Kingdom Advisors Network is a great one. As a matter of fact, we meet on a monthly basis at our office, and Dr. Annette's gave a presentation. So basically the videos that they show. So he was on this last week. So we talked over some of his material on money scripts and money worlds, which is really good. The CFP also has a kind of a forum. I've been on this before as well, and so I actually really enjoyed. I didn't go through the mentor program, but just the forums that they have as you prepare for the CFP exam. So I'm kind of in a position right now, actually myself, where I'll probably be sitting for my boards, probably take the test maybe in November. So yeah. And then the XY Planning Network, that's Michael Kitsis's network he had started. And so they do a really good job of kind of creating. They've got a conference that they do as well. But he does a really good job of creating a network that does a lot of good work. So anyway, just wanted to present that to you. It's there. Ask me if you have questions on it. All right, so let's get into the tax planning world because we want to go back over the material that we make sure that we're covering it well as we go through it. So part of the, what I wanted to do today is just kind of talk a little over what goes into it, and then we'll actually kind of look at the 1040 a little bit even and try to hone in on some of those numbers. And so yeah, the first thing I was going to say is, as we think about tax planning, this is kind of just a reminder. Joe and I were talking just a minute ago about the network that we have as financial planners, trying to make connections with people outside of our own world. And so it's good for us to know that we're not going to be probably, unless we get, we have our accounting, our CPA, and we're going to be a specialist in a firm, probably not going to be like doing 1040s for people or expected to know the ins and outs and the nitty gritty of all of the lines of the tax form. It's good to know the basics though. And I will say that in general, I probably get more questions about taxes than any other sphere of in the financial world, because it just gets brought up so much. So many people have questions that relate to that. And so really what we have to do is we have to kind of become detectives. And so much of what we do in tax planning is not figuring out the questions people are going to have, but answering the questions as they come up. And so being the detective, being the Pink Panther is a big deal to that. And then also the challenge in tax planning is just the drop a rock in the stream effect, right? Everything downstream in tax planning is going to be affected by what you do early on. And so like, as I've been grading these assignments, there have been times when I've noticed, hey, a person misses a number early, or they decide to characterize a number above the line instead of below the line for a deduction or something, and it kind of throws off the whole stream. And so that's wildly frustrating. I mean, and that's why the flow, really, when you think about tax preparing software, it's just a bunch of if then or flow charts that kind of are able to figure out this and that. That's why those are good. They actually are useful for us. It's helpful to know the inner workings behind them, right? Because if you're only ever looking at the numbers now, it's hard to ever make a change, right? But as we kind of grade these things and look at them, some of you guys might be like, oh, I was pretty far off, but just understand that's the effect of tax planning. That's why it can be hard. And then also think about what we want to do as kind of maybe opposed or as different to tax preparers. Tax preparers always only look 1 year in advance, or actually 1 year behind, as they're doing taxes for people, and their goal is to make that person happy in that year, okay? Where that person's paying the least amount of taxes in any given year. Very rarely, though, as a tax preparer, think outside of that and look at the long time horizon for a holistic financial planning picture. And so that's what we should do, you know. And so just keep that in mind. What is the time horizon as we look at tax preparing, as we kind of look at this tax module, because it's not, the recommendations shouldn't just be about this year. I think we can make quite a few of them for this year, but it's not always going to be the case. So all right, so let's kind of go through these numbers from the top to the bottom, okay? And so the first thing I've got this little chart, and a few people have presented this in a few different ways, okay? So some people have done kind of like this. No one probably exactly like this, but some people have decided to go ahead and just delineate in a chart the total income, above the line deductions, adjusted gross income, below the line deductions, then the taxable income, taxes and credits, taxes due, and taxes owed. And so I think it's helpful, even when I'm presenting this to the tax breakdown for them, if they're asking to kind of look and see what and where and how, is to put them in these categories. All right, because this is going to give us kind of a simplified view, really, of the larger 1040. And so look at this, and then you're going to see some notes that we'll have on the side as we kind of walk through this. And so let's go and pull up the 1040 form. You'll see here we are doing the 2023 year tax year. So I think everyone did. We keep that in mind. If you had done, say, 2024, they might be a little bit off. So the first thing we look at is where to and how for should we categorize the different levels of income that they have, right? They've got the CRUT income, they've got their interest from their investments, and they've got their business interest that they've made off of their income plus off of royalties. So that's the money that they have coming in. The only thing that they have offsetting those business expenses is a contribution to a SEP IRA of $7,500. All right, so first, the CRUT income of $55,000 plus the $16,500 in taxable interest is added up and put here. Did a little bit of research on that. Had to kind of dig into where exactly we find taxes on income payments. Okay, and so that actually does flow into a Schedule K1, which would look like that, and then ultimately, yeah, would be reported on the 1040 there. So not that it really matters exactly where that 55,000 rests, as long as it's there before line 9. But
It
that's
would make a difference if it's qualified dividends, because then it'd be taxed at a different schedule, like a different rate.
yeah, Jason. So you're correct. So you're thinking about if you were to make a recommendation for them, instead of having, say, long-term bonds, holdings like dividend paying stocks, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
so
that's
that would
what
be
they
a
have,
wonderful,
though, or is that wrong?
that would be a wonderful recommendation. So yeah, that was another thing too. So as we were doing the 1040, and I apologize if maybe my instructions were not clear on this, but like my hope was that you would run the 1040 as is, and then go ahead and explain the recommendations that you would make, not actually make the recommendations on the 1040. You could, I guess, potentially, but you know, probably the cleanest way to do it would be to go ahead and show where they're at, and then, you know, say, hey, listening, moving forward, you're right. That is a wonderful recommendation, Jason. So, you know, looking to try to make the recommendation that 16,500 they have, which is probably from that large holding of 30-year bonds, 30-year treasuries they have, would probably be better suited maybe in a high quality dividend blue chip stocks. And now the CRUD income, so Dr. Annette said that you could maybe see if you could put, get your CRUD income over into the qualified dividend part. I don't think that's how that works because it is truly producing an income from the trust. So I don't think it necessarily matters that side of things, that 55,000, but for the 16.5, it could affect that. All right, so then let's keep on moving down the line. Now we get to this line here, the additional income from Schedule 1, right? So if you look at Schedule 1, that would be the adjustments to income, right? So we've got business income. And so you can see the challenge in doing taxes is that you're always going to have a 50 tabs open because now, as you can see, because of the business income, we would attach Schedule C to it, right? So we've got $20,000 coming from him, coming from her. And so if you go into, this is Schedule A, I think I have Schedule C would be the profit or loss from business. Mine's blurry for some reason. Here we go. So this is a wonderful, probably one of the best recommendation spots for the DOS household, right? You have part 1 in income, and we know what that would look like, but then the part 2 in expense is really just an opportunity to go line by line down each of these and see if there's an opportunity for you to write off these business expenses. Because, I mean, I could be wrong with what they tell us they make and what kind of fields they're working in, especially the performer musician side of the world. You might find that he has quite a few expenses, maybe maybe more than what he's making. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to talk over this and really lower their taxable obligation, right? Because even the royalty income can be written off against these expenses here. As you guys were working through, we'll get to some other recommendations you have made. But what exact recommendations did you guys make in terms of this business, these business recommendations here?
They could potentially run their health insurance through the businesses.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they should. Yeah, and then that'll be something as well that you can offer up. It'll be in 2 places maybe, right? The insurance planning module as well as this one. But that is a given, a no-brainer. So yeah, you can write off any health insurance expense, even if they had health sharing, that's now allowed to be written off against these expenses as well. And so that's something to consider because that's immense. I mean, I've told you, I think before, but my wife operates an LLC. She receives 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation. And so we play in this sandbox all the time. Well, she listens to me as I explain how we're playing in the sandbox. So anyway, so that's one. What are some other business expenses as sole proprietors that they can write off?
They have like a studio in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have an area of your home that is designated as home office, it's not used for personal use, then you can write off the expenses there. So you can do it pro forma, kind of pro rata based on your expenses, which is a long form, or you can just use a short form now, which it gives you a basically a number that you can use there. So I think it's, yeah, up to 20% of your home, or like 400 square feet, can be written off. And so it's a wonderful thing. Everyone who has a works from home in our world and our gig economy, they should do that. We have a spot, we have a loft in our house. And so that has become the workplace for my wife, and she really does use it as that space, Mostly because we also have kids at home, and in the summer she might need to, get up there and work while the kids are running circles downstairs. So. And that, by the way, that's listed, I think right here. Enter the total square footage of your home, and then the simplified method worksheet, which would be, yeah, you'd have to do the math on that to figure out that number. So, yep. Any other things?
I mean, I imagine to travel, if he's a performer.
Yes. And they also lease a vehicle as well, so that might be a consideration moving forward. Might look into the options that they would have to. You could always do the mileage expense as well, which is usually fairly sizable. I think it's over 65 cents a mile now. So that adds up fast. I mean, if you travel on a regular basis, it could potentially be a few $1,000s there. Anything else?
This would overlap with like the insurance planning, but especially for Aubrey with accounting, she could have some kind of insurance policy, errors and omissions that would be she could write off.
Absolutely. Yep. Even an umbrella policy might fit their need. But yeah, that is absolutely correct. And then even travel and meals. And so we discussed that a little bit last week as well. So all those pieces can flow into this cost here, but for the present being, right, the only thing we can do is a lot for that amount that they had in the SEP IRA. So then that flows into our total income of 104,000. We get some interesting math now from Schedule 1, line 26. Okay. To figure up our adjustment. I didn't put it on this form, sorry. Our adjustment to that. If you look through the notes here, you'll see this number is, it would be FICA tax, right? So it would be their income, earned income, that 32,500 multiplied by 0.153, which is the FICA tax they'd be paying on both sides of Social Security and Medicare since they're self-employed. Okay, and then you take half of that, or sorry, you multiply that by 0.9. Anybody know those numbers? 0.95. There's 4 digits to it. Oh my gosh. I had it somewhere as well.
It's 0.9325 or something like that.
0.9325. Yeah, that sounds right. And so that's how you, and then divide that by half. Now that would be the amount that you can adjust as qualified business income as a deduction. Okay, so it's kind of like a little piece of they feel bad for you, right? Like you've got to contribute to both sides, even the employer side of Social Security and Medicare. So they're going to give you a little nugget of help along the way. Yeah, so that's how you get that number. Now we go to below the line deductions, and in their circumstance, we're going to look at the options to take either the standard deduction or the itemized deduction. Did any of you do the math on the standard deduction? How much that would end up coming out to?
You mean do the math on the itemized?
Itemized deduction, yeah. Sorry.
I think since they didn't have mortgage interest, it became pretty clear that they weren't gonna, because they limited with the salt deduction. So I didn't do the full math.
Yeah, it did seem like it was close enough to even consider.
Right. Yeah, I think it's about 20,000. So And that's the world we live in, unless someone, you know, this itemization schedule is another example, right, of a regressive tax. It really does favor people on the coasts. So Sergio and I here in the Midwest, you know, always complain about this one, right? Because we just don't have the sizable mortgages to really drive the itemization option. I will be honest, in all of the taxes that I've looked at, I've seen very few people itemizing, especially the last few years, since we've seen that number almost nearly double. So, not to say it can't or shouldn't be used, because I think that there's room for again, if you kind of wave out the giving and make it a little more uneven, you can potentially find yourself in a situation where itemizing makes sense, especially for this couple. But in their situation here, I think the number's around 20,000 if they did do the whole Schedule A. A few people did it, which I appreciate you doing the work just to see. Usually a lot of, you know, planners especially will look at this from face value and say, yeah, you're not gonna get that. So you might as well just plug in your 27.7 on line 12 and move on. All right, so that's the below the line deduction. Then you get to this point here, your taxable income, 73,474. Okay, so you can go through the tax tables and figure out the math on it. Here we've used the NerdWallet federal income tax calculator to figure up what exactly that would look like. So if they're taking the standard deduction and they have this much as AGI, we're going to produce $8,376 in tax. Okay. Then we go down here. Okay. This 5652 is again applied from that Schedule 2. That's that 0.153 multiplied by line 8. Any questions so far? Fun stuff, isn't it? Now they paid in $9,500. When we add these two up, we get 14,029. And so 4529 would be the amount that we're anticipating that they would owe in. There are many, many people that were really close on that number. And so a few people were a little bit off. There were a couple of people, I think, maybe that didn't quite see, maybe this federal tax number wasn't right, or they weren't too sure about how the self-employment tax number would work. And I apologize, this number should be 565, should have another digit in there. So, yeah, some implications that come off the top of my head as we're working through this, right? You know, you've got the question of earned income tax credit. Would they potentially, you know, be able to apply for that earned income tax credit, or for people who make probably up to, what is it, 125% of the poverty line or 150% of the poverty level. And so it's an incentive and motivation for them to work to earn their income instead of depending upon entitlement options. And so it is probably something I don't think that fits their need, because they have such a large amount of money flowing in from interest. And so I don't know the exact details on what that looks like, but I'm fairly certain they would not, you know, be able to get a break on the earned income tax credit. And then many of you brought this up as well in your recommendation, but I thought I'd bring it, right? Since they owe $4,529 in this year, there is a chance that there would also be a penalty assessed to that. So safe harbor tax rules say that if you're, you know, able to pay at least 90% in, you know, before tax season, that you won't have any other type of penalties associated with that. And so that is a screaming reason for them to make sure that they are paying in on a quarterly basis. Furthermore, it sounded like it was a stressor to them in the note, right? They were very worried about how much they might owe in taxes. Is that weird to you? I mean, if you have $180,000 sitting in the bank, are you really, should you be too worried? It's not fun to pay in. They might be paying in just a little bit more than maybe if they had done it quarterly. Moving forward, they should do it quarterly, right? But in regard to their asset level, paying that much at the end of the year shouldn't be a big concern for them. All right. I'm going to pause there and kind of want you guys to help me as we answer questions, especially now that there's 5 of us in here. It's awesome. What tax recommendations were you able to make after you kind of go through this? So I'm going to read through your note right now, Jason. Yeah. The stats. So that's the other thing. So Jason just mentioned a California state detail, right, for the itemization. And so there were some people that had brought in state taxes into the conversation. I think that's okay to do. For some reason, that is not, I would not say that is necessarily common practice in our financial planning world as we do tax assessments. I think it's important to note, maybe, if nothing else, but usually there's just such a wide variance of difference between states. So like I live on the border of Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa, really pretty close. And so you know, we try to help clients out because there's all these little details and differences to it. So but to bring in the state conversation is really just if you find something that you know, being a Californian like that, Jason, you'd be happy to bring it up. But I'm not going to probably grade and say, well, you didn't talk anything about California taxes. I'm not going to say that's a you're not going to lose points over that. Let me put it that way. So all right. What recommendations do we have from the tax forms?
I mean, the obvious one is quarterly tax payments to avoid any penalties, and then
Yeah.
just general increasing of their W-2 to make sure they have enough drawn at the end of the year.
Yep.
Open up an IRA for Aubrey, at least one.
Mm-hmm. And Evan, I think I made a note as I was looking through yours today. I'd recommend a Roth IRA for both of them. Okay, time horizon tax planning tells us that we want to slowly move things over into a Roth category for them for further down the road. You know, even as you think about potentially using funds, but I mean, they've got this large pool of money that they need to go ahead and try to put some of that into a Roth category. So now that their income is fairly low, Roth IRA is probably the best choice. Now, 10 years down the road, who knows? I mean, they're so young. Maybe his musician career takes off or he gets a little more royalty income. And at that point, you could look at some other options too. Like not nowadays, the solo Roth 401k is really popular. People are opening them even through like Schwab and stuff. So you can now, you know, easily put another $20,000 plus a year into that Roth category. And so that pays out, you know, if you're using financial planning software and you put that in every year starting at age, you know, your early 20s, that holds big implications for down the road. So I think what you're saying, Evan, makes sense. And I put in my notes as I'm talking to you guys through your work, the Roth IRA is probably one of the more implicative things for time horizon. Like they've got the money, They just need to start using the right vessels to get them down the road.
And they might even consider converting and locking in a lower tax bracket on
Yep.
some of their assets.
Yeah, you could look at the conversions. It would just be in that SEP IRA, right? No, I guess he's a 401k.
They have like for old 401ks that they don't seem to be employed by anymore.
Correct. And so, yeah, I mean, that would be something you'd want to look at, and maybe we're jumping ahead already to the investment module, but to keep it there might make more sense, to your point, to put it in a traditional IRA and then roll it to or do a conversion over to Roth, pay the taxes in that year. They still have a lot of room in the 12% tax bracket. And that's low. I mean, historically speaking, if you can do things in 12%, it makes sense. So yeah, what 70, well, they had what 101,000. So they've got maybe a room to do a $10,000 or $12,000 conversion. I hadn't even thought about that one yet. We've talked about the business expense. We don't need to beat that one up anymore. Healthcare expense was another one, right? Evan, you brought that one up, didn't you? Or Jason, you brought that one up? Did anyone talk anything about higher education? So if you're talking about tax credit, there's really nothing they have opportunity for right now. Now when they have their kid, they'll have the child tax credit. But they might consider the option to go ahead and going back to school. Yeah, if that's something they say, hey, I'm interested in it, you would say, well, yeah, I mean, you would get a big tax credit break. You could take the deduction, the tuition and fees deduction, or you could take the what is it, the America credit.
American Opportunity or Lifetime
Opportunity.
Learning.
Spoken like a true student. Yes, that is a big deal, right? I think, what is it? Up to $2,000. It's a 20% off coupon for college. So maybe more than that. So yeah, that's a thought. And you think about what they're doing, and it might benefit them, right? Like he has royalty payments coming in, and so he might be needing to leverage that the business marketing, e-commerce, that whole sphere now is an option for him, and maybe her as well. All right, so Jason, you talked a little bit about the opportunity of maybe moving some money into a dividend. What funds would you move over to that, so that you would have capital gains or dividend income as opposed
I guess I was more thinking, I think trust income retains the character of the income in the trust, so it would flow through to that 1040 as qualified dividends.
Okay.
So I think that's how it would pass through. And since their trust is all in stocks and REITs.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of represented it.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you telling me that. I'm gonna look into that one, because I have no reason to think it's otherwise. I'd read on the credit income piece, and so that was one thing that I was like looking at. So anyway, but even more than that too, they have some other pieces as well that could potentially flow into almost like a indexing option. Anytime you have a large taxable account like they do, you could potentially go into a diversified portfolio that kind of mimics the S&P 500. And then what that would do is you could sell your losers, hold on to your gainers, and then you can make changes to it over time. So, and so my cat just jumped on my lap. Sorry about that. Say hello, kitty. So the thing about that is it allows you to take ordinary, $3,000 offset losses, in income. And then you can also, if you hold those for longer than a year, see that positive capital gain go to, really that income might flow to them at nothing, right? Because if their income is really that low, then they might not be paying anything in capital gains, and they might not be paying anything in dividend interest. So. Anything else that we're not thinking about? We've covered a lot of the bases so far. We've talked a little on S corps or LLCs. We've talked a little on the itemization option. If they were to have an HSA, that would be a good option as well. Make sure to max fund those when you have the opportunity with the triple tax advantage that they have. All righty. Well, let's go ahead and dive into our lesson today on investments. Share again. All righty. So what's the difference between an advisor and a planner, at least as per the industry? What's the difference?
Our firm kind of breaks it down in a way that's in this as simple as I could put it. The advisor's focus is relationship management, whereas the planners are I can't remember the word they use, but it's more of the research development type of and the analytic side of the planning of the plans.
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. So it's incredibly confusing to people on the outside what we even do. And also there is these little nuggets of hints at kind of the scope or the ethos of what a firm would choose, the path they choose to go down, right? So like if you're going through the process of getting credentialed, you're taking, your Series 7 or Series 66 or what have you. They're going to use this language and terminology that is very technical, right? And so you're actually called investment advisor representatives. So, however, in the field, usually there is a little bit of a difference between a financial advisor and a financial planner. As a matter of fact, I try not to even use the word financial advisor as much as I do investment advisor. To your point, Evan, investment advisors often are seen as wearing the hat of managing portfolios and taking care of the investment side of things. And so financial planners, typically, not always, right? And sometimes these definitions get crossed and mixed and confused in 1,000 different ways. But a financial planner is someone who's kind of looking at trying to kind of create a plan for somebody, right? Like a holistic, comprehensive financial plan, very similar to what you guys are doing through this capstone project. And so I'm always quick to tell people, like when they come in, they sit across the table from us. Most of them think that I would be there simply and solely to be their investment advisor. Right. I'm going to try to take their funds. I want to try to invest them for a fee. And so a lot of times what we have to do is we have to kind of reorient that discussion to say, listen, it's actually is not quite like that. We would, potentially want to come into a relationship with you so that we can manage your investments, but it's going to be built alongside of a larger financial plan. And so that's really what drives, right? The investments is what you have going on in a plan. And so at that point at least our process is like today I sit down with a couple and the husband goes, he starts by going, here's my wife's stuff. We want to move it to you guys. So let's just, whatever you need to do to drop the paperwork. And I always have to stop, and because this happens often, right? And it's like, well, thank you. We're hopefully excited to work with you as well. But we want to get to know you. We don't feel good about making recommendations for you without getting to know your situation, without getting to know who you are, right? Like, we want to be more than just, a transactioneer, a place to house retirement accounts, because she was stopping work at her 401k, the place where she was working. It's like, no, let's back it up and try to kind of figure out that relationship that we want to build with you as a client. And so I really like that. Like it's really healthy. I think that I've been afforded the opportunity to work at a place that's like that, because not everyone is, not all firms are going to be, building out plans and doing that. Some of them, it's just not their model. Some of them are going to be more that investment house. Like, hey, we're just going to manage your investments and we can answer one-off questions for you. But what the plan's going to be, is kind of just a little bit of what what it seems like that might be the best option for you. So I kind of backed them up a little bit, told them we would want to get to know more about their whole picture, what she has potentially coming down the line in Social Security, what a new job would look like when she transitions, what his situation is like. And so that was that's a common thing. Like, people don't necessarily think when they walk into the doors of a place that's going to have financial planning, they don't know what you are or what you do. Sometimes they think you're traders, like investment analysts, or that you're behind the desk always and constantly trying to make decisions for portfolio optimization, or that you're going to be rolling over your portfolio 50 times a year to try to gain whatever. And so that's rare. I don't know, I guess maybe it happens places, but anyway, wanted to talk over those differences and those nuances, because that language does matter. And so I have to put on my card investment advisor representative, even though I don't really care to use the word investment or advisor in my title. We like and all of our guys in our office, there's 7 of us, we do team planning and building and things like that, but we go by financial planners. At least that's what we like to call ourselves. So we try not to be too snooty about it. Anyway, that being said, let's dive into this lesson, right, on the investment side of things, because we always tell people, it is a big hat that you do wear. And oftentimes it is what they are expecting from you when they're coming through the door. Hey, what should I do with my investments? And so really what this lesson does is it goes all through these different 5 reasons, or kind of situational factors that are going to affect investment planning. Okay, risk tolerance, expectations about market conditions, client's knowledge or experience, how to kind of gauge that, the time horizon, and then the capacity that they might have to handle risk. So like right off the bat, kind of let's start from the bottom up. What do you know about the Doss household? What is their capacity to handle risk?
Seems to be all over the place. They
right.
Bitcoin and a while swings there, but also there's, I think, a note on Devin's concern with the volatility of the market. So
Yeah.
it seems mixed.
Also, they expect 40% return.
Yeah, that's right.
That had to have been words.
That's ignorance.
Like, I don't think you could even make that up. Someone actually probably had to have said that. So there are people out there who think those things. Yeah, so oh man, I forgot. So okay, let's talk a little on risk tolerance. I'm going to jump all over the place. Okay. There are a lot of reasons, like a lot of, as you go through the requirements as a fiduciary, right, to make sure that you're gauging your clients' levels of risk. That's kind of a big key point, right? Are you making sure that you understand your clients' appetite for risk, their capacity to take volatility? Because there is, and truth be told, a lot of people out there who their story involves them getting out in 2020. They got out in 2008. They got out in 2001, and then they got back in when the markets had risen. And then they wonder why their average investment yield is like 3%. And they're in the market. It's like, well, because you didn't have a capacity for it, and yet you still chose to invest. Furthermore, if you're not properly lining out the expectation for the volatility that you might expect to see, then a client could very easily come to you and be like, what's happening? Why are accounts moving down? What is this down 20%? And so I actually had this client, I just couldn't stop thinking about them today. So they had $106,000 in their retirement account. He had more in his. He works at a factory. She worked at a hospital. She was invested there in their stable value fund. It's at Fidelity. It yields a 1% return. And she told me that she started that 36 years ago. And she has never changed the allocations. And she was self-admitted that she knew I should have more in my account. I didn't know much. I was never educated on investments. I didn't believe that I wanted to try to experience, the ups and downs in the market. So I took the stable value option, 1%. And so, I'm preparing this lesson after this meeting, and I'm kind of doing the math on it. So I kind of figured up that she contributed $2,460 a year on average over 36 years, right? So she has $106,000. So what do you guys think? Knowing you're smart, the time value of money, what's the amount if she had invested it in in the market and she had received a 9% return on her money? How much would she have in her retirement account? Just off the top of your heads, or if you had the calculator out, you could run the numbers. What do you think?
You said 2,600 a year?
Yeah. 2,460. So less than 2,600 a year. 36 years. Joe, you gonna take a gander?
I'm getting there. It's gonna be a while here. I don't have it right in front of me.
Ballpark of maybe 1.5 million or something like that. That's just a ballpark guess.
Sure. Yeah, not quite that high, but still
Feels like $1 million. That was kind of my guess.
yeah, it's 580,000. But think about how life altering that would be right now for her. She's actually she's gonna stop working at a hospital and go be a travel nurse. Work for a couple of years. Hopefully they make a lot more money than traditional jobs, but her kids are all out of the house and she's decided she wants to do that. But the difference between 106,000, so she's actually lost purchasing power, right? Because she hasn't invested that money in anything of real substance. But the difference between those two figures are just so there's such a disparaging difference there. And so it's really I always have to check myself to be like, okay, listen, you're not going to ever help someone by shaming their past or telling them they should have done something different. I didn't do that in this case, but like thinking about the risk aspect, right? What is risk? Because sometimes risk does need to be redefined. Risk as it relates to the regulatory environment of our financial planning world tells us that we need to understand our reward, but also the risk that goes with it. Okay. Risk in maybe a more practical sense would be defined as not having the money when you need it. Or it not being there. And so inflationary risk and the risk that you're taking by not investing your retirement funds when you're young, especially by putting them into at least predominantly a market exposed portfolio, that risk is very real. And like that client, is a great example of that. Not the only one we've seen like that, but like she could be very comfortable between the small pension she'll get, her Social Security, and that amount with her husband having about the same amount in his retirement account. But she hadn't taken she just didn't know, and was worried and concerned, and maybe that was something that was even maybe and she had mentioned this, her family, none of them believed in markets, or the gambling in the stock market, as sometimes they put it. So a lot of times our job, right, is to come alongside of people and help them feel more comfortable by providing some of that market exposure that they need in their plan. So that's a big thing in our world, is figuring out how to define risk. And so, not that I'm trying to redefine it, because it is a compliance regulatory thing too, but risk is not having the funds when you need them. And so expectation, going on to the second one about future market, is a big deal as well. And so a lot of times this perception is framed within some questions that you might ask. And so here are some different questions that people have asked before. I think some of this can be helpful. I think a lot of questionnaires are not very helpful. Our office, just to be honest, we ask the question like, what are you most concerned about? Retirement, the market downturns, inflation, all these different things. I'd rather take these questions because I think it helps us a lot of times get to an answer to a question, even if it's not answering that question, right? Number one, I will be honest, so many people would answer B to number one. So many people would answer B to over the last 5 years if it read like that to begin with, which is crazy, right? Because the last 5 years, markets have done really well, but people will anchor themselves to 2022, and sometimes even make it, political or whatever. And it's like, man, we've had some good times. Markets have done really well, and you haven't heard that. Even if you have an account that's showing those numbers, those raw hard numbers. Satisfaction numbers, 10-point Likert scales are always fine. Good questions to ask. I did a lot of research on financial satisfaction. So kind of, it's important to gauge. Some people will come in and they won't have much at all, but they'll still feel good about where they are because they'll explain the story of where they've come from too. Right. So, and then some people are extremely well off and have the 7-figure retirement accounts. And then they're also, they don't think they're doing too well. So, you know, that all plays into it. So anyway, what are we measuring here in these questions? You know, if you really think about it, if you really look at it, what are we measuring? There is a expectation piece, which we talk about there in the word above. But then there's also a financial education question, really. How, you know, if an undergirding, right? You're always want to know a little bit more about your clients because they might just not have the education that they have had needed to make good decisions in the past. It might not be at all about bad decision making. Oh, this person is just spends all they have, or they're mired in credit card debt. It might just be an aspect of the fact that they've never been taught the right things. And then salience. A lot of times these are measuring just how financially aware people are with reality, with where they stand. So time horizon. Probably, I would say, the biggest one, most important one of all 5 that we see here: risk, expectation, knowledge, time horizon, and capacity. Because if you really think about it, time horizon should really drive our investment philosophy and where we're at. So often you see people in our world, you know, who say, well, like the traditional idea of, what should I do with my investments as I get older? I should shift from more stock to more bonds, you know, in a smooth pattern all the way from, you know, my working days to the start of retirement. And then at that point, I should be in, you know, my age, 100 minus my age, have that exposure in bonds. And so, I always tell people time horizon planning is really the heart and soul of what we're doing when we're trying to figure out how someone's situation is going to drive their portfolio and where we're going to put them in. And so we do a little bit of bucketing at our work, but typically it's there so that we can understand how to create, especially in retirement planning, when you get close to the need for that money, right? At that point, then we don't want to have too much market exposure. So like say within the next 5 years, if you know for a fact you're going to need funds in the next 5 years, then the market, I mean, it's 70% of the time up, but the 30% of the time that it's not up, it's not good, right? And that's not fitting for most people in their need. And so we're going to go ahead and shift our investments to take the need that they would have over the course of maybe the next 5 years out of the retirement account. We put that in a bond fund, right? That's going to be yielding, but it's not going to have much volatility. And then we're going to put the rest in a stock fund. But I will also say that, you know, again, the concept of risk is oftentimes misunderstood, right? And so bond funds in 2022 are just the classic example of how you really oftentimes are not, you know, you can't always trust that bonds are going to be the safer place to rest, right? And equity and the market is going to be the riskier option, because a lot of bond portfolios and a lot of bond funds still have not recovered from 2022. So here we are nearly 3 years into the future, and those funds, at least their values, have still not bounced back. And so, you know, take the Doss family. The Doss family, what they have 30-year bonds. So what's the purpose of those funds? What do you guys think? Why would they be invested in 30-year bonds? Anybody have any ideas on why'd they do that?
They probably wanted the stability of it.
So
as a
what
way to like reduce the risk because they have other.
So what would have happened to, so just say they go out and buy the BLV, the Vanguard Long-Term Bond Fund. What do you think would have happened between 2021 and now?
Probably would have been losing value depending on
Yeah.
when they entered it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Like bond funds still trade and they trade relative to, where interest rates have been and where they're going. And so I know for a fact that if that say they were in a bond fund like that, it's probably down 30% and probably still hasn't rebounded. Right? So like it's possible, and I get it. It has been an extreme example what happened between 2021 of nearly zero interest rate environment to where we went to after all of the inflation and the spike in interest rates in 22. But there's still risk there, and there's a lot. Most people are not going out and buying 30-year treasury bonds at Treasury Direct, right? Like they're not holding those to maturity. They're going out and buying funds that still trade and move with the market. And so there is still they have this idea, and that, granted the betas are lower, the volatility is lower, right? But you can still find yourself in a situation where those bond funds, right? As a matter of fact, I think the BLV probably traded at like 110 in 2021, and it's still at like $75 a share now. Yeah, right. And if you bought it at 110, it's not paying you 4% like it is now. It's still paying, whatever the you would have bought it at, really. And so all that being said, a lot of times there's a lot of misconceptions about long-term bonds maybe being the safer option out there. And especially in the present world, that's not been the case. And so it's going to be a long, slow march back to even for those people. And so, but yeah, all that being said, time horizon is integral, and I really do think that's true. Like if you're outside of retirement planning, if you have funds and you're looking to try to allocate them, whether it's 529 account funds for your kids getting ready to go into college, you need to start shifting that allocation when they're in high school because you never know when the next big recession could hit. If you're looking to buy a house with maybe some taxable funds, right? And you're playing the game of allowing them to grow in an investment. But you're trying to, of course, figuring out, should I be more in the market or more in bonds? Well, the time horizon will give you the answer to that. So there's only actually been one 10-year draw down in the market. Historically speaking, that was 2001 to 2010. Market was down 1%, right? So, a lot of times that risk reward, where should we be invested, how to, wherefore, most people, especially when they're young, especially with retirement accounts, probably would do better to move out of maybe even target date funds and allow them, their funds to be invested in all equity, slowly shifting those maybe into a little bit more bonds, maybe in their 50s. But that, of course, all depends upon where, what they need. And so capacity is the next one. And so here you see capacity, of course, is really the things that kind of go alongside someone to tell them if they're able to accept risk. So any questions up to that point? The different aspects, situations, right? What people come in with, that's going to affect how we would love to come alongside them and invest with them, in those ways. All right, let's talk a little bit about the investor policy statement. So these are really good. I've only done these for nonprofits, and so I'm really excited to kind of see what you guys are producing here for this. But basically what this is kind of an agreement to between the client, between the planner, about how all of this is going to work together. Okay, so you can see an example of the student managed fund that they have here at Biola. And so you've got also some other examples he has linked to down here. But these are really good tools because they provide us an opportunity to understand more, right? About how we're going to be investing, the guardrails maybe we would be using. If you're going to invest someone in a unique type of portfolio, your methodology, well, any methodology is good, right? But also methodologies within a type of investing portfolio. Like here's the biblically responsible investing methodology. We have delineated we've got several different faith-driven portfolios, which are pretty neat. Like we really enjoy the process of that. We've got a kind of a strict portfolio and then a normal portfolio. But we, go ahead and delineate that for clients because it's good for them to see the methodology of us as we go through making investments on their behalf. And we'll say most of these things are kind of industry standards, right? Like you actually can't have more than 50% of portfolio in an individual type of investment. And still be able to draw an asset under management fee from them. So there are some things that are also like, well, this is always going to be the way it is, but it's good for them to understand like we are diversified. We will be investing our, different bond and stock strategies in this and that. And at times we can take discretion and move funds from one to another as need be and as seen fit. So, I will say this one is probably going to be a little longer than what you would have. But you get the template, let that kind of drive your process. We draw these up for all our nonprofits, but I kind of like the idea of using them for everybody. It's also good too, because at times when markets are down, people need reassurance. And so they also need reassurance that they've committed to something, not just their financial planner is committed on their behalf to a investment directive or strategy. And so that is there's something firming about that when you put pencil to paper or pen to paper and you're signing to make those decisions.
So it's just basically a guiding document on the approach that you're going to take to the handling the investments. Yeah, okay,
right.
Got it.
And I will say probably most places that we only do these for nonprofits because a lot of times that's a requirement. They're going to take these papers back to their committee or board to discuss that. But even with individual clients, what it does is it allows them to see your method, your portfolio creation method. And so, it really is an educational tool as well as a commitment piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, then this is kind of just talking over through some different, we're not going to go through all these in individual, and most of you guys should know what all of these different investments are. Some of these are never going to be fitting, especially for what you're going to probably be wanting to do. I mean, there's a lot of news out there. Take REITs, for example, not real estate, but real estate investment trusts. I'm not talking about REITs that are publicly traded, I'm talking about privately traded REITs. So much out there of advisors that went out and promised the moon to their clients with this product. And then sure enough, it ties up their money in illiquid processes where maybe they can only get their money out after a certain amount of time, and privately held REITs have kind of hold all the cards in that regard, and they can even change that from what they had set up whenever you'd put money in. And so there's a lot of planners out there who put people's retirement funds in these illiquid options, and what do you know, retiree needs a distribution out of that and you're toast, right? All of a sudden you find yourself on broker check because you've had so many red flags or client complaints lodged against you. So In the end, what our investment philosophy is at our office, you know, we have an option to be able to put people in all bonds or all stock, but right, like you kind of grow to develop a portfolio that you really do genuinely feel is going to be in the best interest of a typical client, right? So our all equity portfolio, you know, it's going to have the base of the S&P 500, and then you're going to mix in some growth stock, some value stock, some mid cap and small cap, you know, and that's all backed by research and literature that, you know, having those pieces, firing is good. So take small cap, mid cap, for example. Mega caps have dominated the market in the last year and a half, more than that. But it's been even more pronounced as time has went on. And so it hasn't paid at all almost to be in these, you know, the smaller 3,200 stocks in the stock market out there, right? Like the top 7 have really dominated, shown the growth, and that's really where gains have been shown. Well, like even just a week or two ago, when it was pretty certain then from some remarks from the Fed that we're going to see interest rates finally start to be on the decline, probably just 25 basis points and probably in September. Well, we saw small cap, mid cap respond well to that news, right? And so we actually saw money flowing out of mega cap for the first time in a long time. And it was actually moving not out of the market at large, but into these other aspects and areas of the market that had kind of just been sitting dormant almost for a long time. So it's good to have exposure, all right, to this diversified portfolio, because maybe not all the sides in the market are always going to be firing at the same time. And maybe not in the last 5 years, you probably have more if you didn't invest in the small cap, mid cap, but kept everything isolated and, you know, the top cluster of, you know, the Magnificent Seven or whatever they're calling them. But in the long run, you do want to have at least a little bit of exposure to that, even if it's just 5 to 10%. It's good to have a little bit of international exposure, but not too much. A lot of times when we meet with clients who are in 401k portfolios, a lot of them have 30 or 40% exposure to international, which is way too high. So we usually try to tell them, listen, we want to dial that back. Some of those are even in portfolios that they don't create. Those are in target date funds and, you know, kind of set it and forget it, cookie cutter options. But first off, America-based companies versus, you know, domestic versus international. Our domestic companies are all multi-global or multinational global corporations. And so you want to have, you know, exposure to international. You're going to have it even with domestic plays. And so it's good to have some international, but probably no more than 15% in that. So you know, that's the kind of thing that we focus on in our world, you know, and then after that, we sprinkle in some unique ETFs that are just going to give us options to kind of dial in or dial up our play in, you know, say materials or financials or things, healthcare, things like that. So, you know, one thing it talks about here when it talks about these correlations, you know, it says in a high inflationary environment, commodities work well, you know, and in low inflation environments, stocks and bonds are better. And so we saw that in 22, right? Commodities, real estate did do fairly well, especially commodities were the only thing that worked. Commodities, oil and gas, and utilities, maybe a few of the, you know, high earner or yeah, value plays were about the only things that were working. So it's important to be able to have all of that in a you know, your general good diversified portfolio. So, and finally at this end, it's almost like an appendix. We've got some different formulas that we see: variance and standard deviations, coefficients, betas, and things like that. So finally, there's some general investment strategies. We've talked a little on this one, right? Dividend paying stocks can potentially reduce tax costs after you've held them for more than a year and they're long term at that point. Even your ETFs are going to be about 90% tax efficient, right? And so for the most part, so an ETF might be trading in and out of different types of securities. And so those short-term gains might produce inefficiencies for that. But for the most part, they're nearly qualified, right? Some different plays on tips and things like that. I bonds were really popular even just in 2022. People bought into so many I bonds that the Treasury Direct had to redo their website because they had too much traffic coming in because they were paying 9%, right? Markets were kind of cratering a little bit, and but the I bonds are kind of an interesting animal because they've got a fixed interest piece, but then they also have the inflationary adjustment, right? So if you were able to get the fixed interest before we really saw the inflationary adjustment increase, that's where you got that like 9 or 10% yield. Of course, that inflation, thankfully, right? Because inflation rates didn't last for very long. That amount came down to like 3% last year. And so all those people getting, who had thrown money into these I bonds, I think you could do $10,000 per person per year, have really shifted out of that play because now it's yielding like 3 to 3.5%, which is lower than what you can get like at an online savings account. So anyway, it's interesting to see how quick people are to attach themselves to this or that thing, trying to make a little bit more. So there are some other things too. I mean, you can always write calls or even puts to increase your portfolio income. That is a high energy type of option out there, right? It takes a lot of effort to do that. I mean, you can yield at times upwards of 20% doing something like that, but it's going to require weekly and sometimes even daily attention to those because it does take a little bit of effort. So, and what that is, say you take I don't know, a blue chip company like Ford, you go out and buy an option. You're basically in a way taking a calculated bet that the stock is going to rise to a certain level. So let's say Ford's trading at $14. I buy a $15 call. It expires in 1 month on August 25th or whatever. Usually all call options expire on the Friday afternoon at 3:30. So you've got an option to, basically exercise that call, once it hits the strike price. Or you can just trade in that call option, let someone else exercise it, and basically take the gains. And so what it does is it's just magnifying glass on gains, but what it also does is it gives this time value implication to it, right? So the time value is going to be diminishing as it gets closer to that expiration date. Now, if you're writing calls, okay, you're the one who's receiving the income. And basically at that point, you're saying, listen, I don't care. Even if the stock does go up, I'm going to go ahead and take my interest and I'm okay with, the 3% you're going to pay me, to go out and buy that call. So. We saw a lot of laddering going on with CDs and treasuries, of course, the last couple of years because of the rise in interest rates. And so basically what you're doing at that point is you're allowing one one CD or a bond to come due and then going out and purchasing another one. And so, it kind of takes out a little bit of that future interest rate risk. Like if interest rates really do crater, they go down fast, we find ourselves in a recession, and potentially it could, lock you in for a little bit longer while also still allowing you to reassess your funds as they come due. All right, y'all. we've come to the end of the road for tax planning. I will tell you that one interesting aspect of the Doss household is that they don't really have much of any of their money in a conventional investment strategy, right? So like you can go a lot of different places with this. But definitely would probably recommend that you guys at least have some of their money moving in the direction of what you would, say is a normal type of investment portfolio. So even his 401k has got issues, doesn't it? Yeah, you guys watch what Starbucks been doing lately?
Yeah.
Yeah, not so hot, apparently anybody can make coffee, and some people think that their coffee is actually not that good. So I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm not a big Starbucks fan.
Neither am I.
All right, Sergio, anything? Jason, Evan?
Nope.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good evening. Feel free to holler at me as things come up. All right.
Thanks.
You bet. Have a good one.
Thanks, Alex, brother.
Thanks.